Okay, so welcome to the second in this series of webinars between Polsource, Copado and CodeScan. And this was entitled How to Deliver Salesforce Innovation Faster with DevOps. Oops. Let's go to the second slide. So on the panel today, you've got me. I'm Mark McConnell. I'm the senior technical architect at Polsource. I've been with Polsource 2.5 years, and I've been in the Salesforce arena for 11 years. I've recently just got both system architect and application architect on the Salesforce Domain Architect exams. So, Will, over to you.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Will O'Brien. I'm the Customer Success Director at CodeScan. I've been with the company for about 4 years now, working with our customers to make sure that their CodeScan implementation is as smooth as possible.
I'm Andrew Davis. I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing at Copado. I've been with Copado a little bit more than a year, but I've been focused on the Salesforce DevOps space for the last 6 years or so. I'm author of the book Mastering Salesforce DevOps.
Of which I have a signed copy, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about Polsource. So we're a boutique SI. We have a big development center in Poland. We have offices, a fair few in EMEA and a fair few in the US. Looking at the number of certifications, that number goes up daily, but last count I think was about 903. That we've got. I think we're averaging about 4.5 certifications per employee. We have many expertise. Obviously, one is DevOps, but we're very strong in Service Cloud, Field Service, Einstein Analytics, Communities, Heroku, and integration. We've been going since 2006. That's we've been around for about 14 years. Do you want to do a bit of an intro to CodeScan and Copado companies?
Sure.
Sure. And we've got some other intro slides a little bit later on.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, interesting quote from Mark Benioff, but you need to get ready for the future ahead of your customers and be ready to greet them when they arrive. Now, what does that actually mean? So, Salesforce has been going for probably 20 years, and they release, they have 3 big releases every year. So they're releasing functionality sort of like a lot of the time. And when you're doing big projects, it's how to keep up with those projects, particularly when they're big enterprise projects, and pushing that functionality forward. The part of that process is DevOps, and how do you do it efficiently? How do you get your team to concentrate on the looking at the user stories, delivering high quality code, which is repeatable, and have a scalable solution to deliver that. And that's really what we want to talk about tonight. So, oh yeah, sorry. I was just speaking about that, but the idea is that as part of any Salesforce project, you want to deliver your the value of your new functionality at speed. But there's no point producing it at speed if you then during the QA process or the UAT process, user acceptance process, or indeed worst case in production, is you start finding issues to do with Salesforce limits, etc. So the idea is to deliver value at speed with high quality, and that's what a proper enterprise level DevOps process will ensure. On the next one, what was the next slide?
Yeah. So this is where Copado comes in. So Copado is the leading Salesforce DevOps tool. So it helps to orchestrate the entire development lifecycle, from the planning phase through to building, coding, testing, through your delivery, deployment, release phase, through monitoring and production. So Copado manages every aspect of the development lifecycle and acts as sort of a central way to orchestrate the entire process of creating and delivering value for your end users. So Polsource we've partnered with Copado for some time, or Copado has partnered with Polsource for some time, based on their expertise in the process. But we also have tight integrations with CodeScan, where Will's representing, but also all of the other major testing tools and other tools that you might plug into your development lifecycle. So this is Copado's focus, is really to enable Salesforce development at scale. So to begin to manage the complexities of managing changes, delivering changes, monitoring, making sure the whole team is on the same page, that everybody's able to collaborate efficiently, and just functioning as a backbone for the entire DevOps process.
Do you want to skip forward?
Go for it.
So I'll give you a bit of an introduction to CodeScan. And so CodeScan is a static analysis tool that's completely focused on Salesforce developers. We were founded in 2014, and since then we've built a rule set of over 350 rules. We cover everything from Apex to Aura and LWC Lightning, the Salesforce metadata the configuration, as well as Visualforce. So we have on-premise and cloud solutions available to and are continuously expanding and improving that rule set, as well as our integrations like with Copado, and integrations with popular repositories, CI tools, and IDEs. The vision for CodeScan is really to improve the way the DevOps and development teams enforce and maintain the quality of their code as they develop for Salesforce. And how we do this is we provide the tools for complete visibility on that quality while they're doing that Salesforce development. So allowing these teams to define standards and customizable rule sets so they can gain that visibility and then enforce those standards. So they can streamline that review process, and it frees up times to focus on things that really matter. I think I'll speak a little bit on the next slide as well. Martin.
Yep.
So the shift left. I've mentioned standardization and visibility a couple times, and I'm sure you can get an inkling of the value of those two words. But to really get the full value out of these concepts, we really need to apply them as early as possible, and that's what's known as shifting left. So the shift left relates to your development cycle, as we can see on this this graph here, from planning and designing to a full release and monitoring your production. So the later in this process that the issues are found, the more expensive they are to rectify, especially if they're being found by your customers. So by shifting the code quality focus left, we can begin to weed out the issues as early as possible. And that's why we refer to CodeScan as an end-to-end tool, because we're starting this process as early as code's typed into the IDE. So for example, our IDE plugins will connect to your server, your on-premise or CodeScan cloud, and allow you to leverage the standards that you've put together for your organization and gain the visibility on the relevant issues to you as you type. Then as you're pushing that code, as your developers are pushing that code, Copado is checking these changes within user stories to check that code and gate it as necessary. And these codes here, these checks are super valuable. So they allow the developer to get visibility on very specific sets of files and changes, provide a quality gate, a pass or fail, directly on them to make them aware of the standards in place. And once you're in production, CodeScan and through Copado as well are providing full org scans that give you insight into any existing issues. So when you're scanning orgs and in production, they allow you to track the quality of the code over time and also plan a refactoring effort if you have any major issues in there. So when you combine that that end-to-end visibility with a strong focus on the left-hand side of this model, the well-defined standards, and also a reliable development and release process with tools like Copado, what you're getting is a confidence in a high-level feedback, like a pass or fail, and a bit of an ability to dig further down with the tools and rectify the issues to create more confidence downstream.
Done well?
I am.
Thank you. I think
So
Andrew,
just to speak to some of the challenges, just before we get into the details of you know, some of the questions and answers and discussion about this, the reason you have a dedicated tool like Copado helping to manage the Salesforce development lifecycle is because the Salesforce platform is unlike any other. It's it's very, very different from your traditional code-based platforms. It really is a it functions like a platform as a service tool, but it's configured like software as a service. So you've got all of these complex XML files that if you're trying to get started with version control, then it's not hard to do the basics and to sort of spin up, you know, begin to track things in version control and begin to try to automate deployments with traditional tools. But you very, very quickly get into these challenges, you know, merging XML and keeping every feature separate from every other. And so often people are optimistic when they get started trying to orchestrate it, but if they don't have a well-built tool for that process, but then they realize it's a huge investment to try to replicate all of the logic that's been built into tools like Copado. So you can go to the next slide.
Sure. Oh, go on.
Yeah, we'd just like to introduce, so this is a fireside chat. So it's really just an open format, a chance for us to begin to discuss some of these topics, but we'd love to have you as listeners begin to put your own questions into the chat. We'll be monitoring that as we go through and trying to round robin, speak to some of those challenges that you may be experiencing in the development lifecycle. Martin, Will, and I are going to share our ideas and thoughts on some of these topics, but really this is your opportunity to hear from us, ask your questions, and let us all together kick around some important ideas in this challenging problem.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Will, and thanks, Andrew. In terms of, and again, I think you know, I've been in DevOps for the past probably 6-7 years, and I've seen many companies take very different approaches to DevOps. You know, starting from chain sets, you know, all the way to specific Salesforce development DevOps tools such as Copado. And there is a reason that as Polsource, we are using Copado and CodeScan for our DevOps. So in terms of historical reasons, right? What are the things that start to have issues if you're using chain sets, for instance? So I know, Andrew, you've had a lot of experience. I know you've mentioned it a lot in your book as well, but it's where companies start to fall over with that.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if you're asking, but first of all, the change sets, it only supports a limited amount of the metadata. It allows you to move things from one environment to another. It only supports a limited subset of what's supported in the metadata API, and the user interface is, I don't know if there's anybody from Salesforce on the line, it's horrendous. It's incredibly bad user interface. You select some things on page 1, go to page 2, all your selections are lost, right? So the change sets user interface provides the bare minimum functionality you would need to begin to move things from environment to environment, but you're going to have a slow, tedious process that really is just not designed to move changes at speed, and it doesn't have anything in there like version control. So that's my attack on change sets.
And there really isn't any way to implement like a quality gate that, you know, you can't say, right, yeah, I'm going to reject my change set because there's no unit test there. So that's one of the other ones. And the other big problem will be that where you're having multiple work streams, multiple vendors on a project, using change sets really starts to break down, which is when then people start to look at things like you know, Git. Git is your version control system, which is great, but Git it doesn't really know anything about Salesforce. Number one. Then have something like Jenkins, which again is a multi-platform tool. It's there for scheduling. It's calling other services to do other stuff. But again, it's not specific to Salesforce. You can use that for many platforms. I think Jenkins comes with hundreds of different plugins for these, but none of that is going to work out of the box unless you have someone who's really familiar with scripting with Jenkins. Jenkins has to run on a server or platform somewhere. PMD, let me put free in inverted commas static code analysis tool, but it is quite limited in what it can do. And I don't know, Will, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So PMD is great for a free tool. It has a set of rules that are focused only on the Apex code in CodeScan. But like you said, Martin, the inverted commas free, the time it takes to actually set up and integrate into a pipeline, especially a homegrown pipeline, definitely depends on the expertise of someone with the CI tool that's in that homegrown pipeline. So yeah, what we're working towards when you're looking at the quality tools that on the enterprise side, the paid tools, they have a much easier way to integrate with these with Salesforce itself and with the tools that are focused on Salesforce.
Yeah, I'm giving an example that you know, we often run scan on different projects, and initially when I joined, you know, when I used PMD a few years ago, maybe PMD would show you know, 500 issues, and they would all be predominantly on Apex because that's what the rule set is. But then when you run something like CodeScan, you're then looking at 4,000, 5,000 issues. It is a huge. It's actually looking at everything, and the fact that you can actually track that issue to closure within CodeScan, you can see when it's fixed. With PMD, you get no traceability of who fixed it or when it was fixed or if it was ever fixed.
Just to give a little, sorry, go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, just on the size of the rule sets as well. There's definitely a focus, and what I try and encourage our customers to do is really dig into that rule set and start to build and customize that rule set, because having more rules is great and it gives you a lot more options, but it doesn't really make quality. It doesn't really create value until you know that you have those relevant issues where they're popping up and you've customized them to a level where those issues are relevant to you, say with severities in the tool and also the frequency they pop up. Because once developers are seeing a lot of issues, there is great visibility there, but noise is noise as well. So it's balancing that the amount of visibility to the amount of relevance is a really important step in that configuration.
Yeah.
Martin, you told me about how Polsource, you had a group of architects get together and look through all the rules in CodeScan and sort of figure out which ones are really relevant to your teams. And then you guys customized that rule set to your needs, and you customized all the thresholds and so forth. You're going to say more?
Yeah. We did indeed. We had many fun evenings discussing that at length, which I think I've got over that experience. But yes, it was really, really good. Um, the other thing is that you may have a different rule set for implementing a native project. So if you're starting from scratch, you're going to start on a very strict rule set, which would enforce. But if you then find that same rule set against a code base that's been in operation for the last 8 years, you're going to end up with many issues, and it's quite scary. But by changing that rule set, by being pragmatic, yes, okay, fine, that is a major issue, but is it going to make production fall over? No. Is it something I can look at on the next release? Yes, and that's what we decide to do. So we've got different rule sets depending on where we are in the project lifecycle as well. And we still have those conversations, and it's a continuous process. Commenting is a real bugbear where people, what level of comment should go in. Should you have self-commenting code, which is again another topic, but we have those discussions quite a lot. Something else.
Just to give a little bit of context about the Salesforce, the first question on here, just in terms of the context of things, what I've seen, even in the 6 years that I've been focusing on this, is just such an escalation of focus on these topics like version control, how to manage the development lifecycle, how to begin to layer in more sophisticated tools like this in the Salesforce platform. And so just to set the context, this was not on people's radar 10 years ago in Salesforce world, right? They were just getting started with Apex coding, and you could have a low-code admin who created a trigger, and everything was fairly simple. And Salesforce was still largely the no software platform, right? The simple platform. But what we've seen is the interest in these kinds of topics has been growing, and I would say growing exponentially as Salesforce has grown their business and as people have begun to build massive levels of complexity onto the platform. The topic of static analysis, most people in the Salesforce world still don't know that word, right? What does that mean, static code analysis? But it's very well known in the code-based, in the code-focused world, the Java world and so forth. And so what we're seeing here with folks like CodeScan, with Polsource's expertise in this, and certainly with Copado, is bringing these topics that are critically important for managing complex software products, bringing those into the Salesforce world. And so we're seeing more and more interest in version control, but if people really struggling to figure out how to get started and struggling to figure out how to knit together all their different tools. We do have a couple of questions. Charlie Johnson in here asking about automated regression testing options and whether Copado has integrations for executing automated testing scripts from the development and then from developers as well, integrating with tools like Excel Q. And I would say that's where a tool like Copado fits in as an orchestration platform that allows you to run your automated unit tests, whether those are Apex or JavaScript tests, but also having plugins and integrations with commercial tools like Excel Q. And that's where that's really the meaning of an orchestration engine, to sort of help look across the whole dev life cycle and allow you to layer in whatever different technologies you want to bring into the platform. And that's why, that's the sort of the level at which we've reached in the Salesforce ecosystem. People realizing having an integrated orchestration layer on top of the whole dev process is important. Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question about the automated regression testing, because if you're building a project, and particularly when you get multiple vendors coming in, what guarantee do you have that what you've deployed to production, you've then got 2 more releases, 2 more projects coming in? What guarantee can you have that what you're deploying is not going to affect that? Unit tests, Apex unit tests will go so far. You then layer on top the automated regression testing, which is then going through all of the regression scripts that, in not in the olden days, because a lot of people still do it, but somebody will step through a process in Excel saying, press this button, go here, do that. Now with Copado with a Selenium recorder, you can actually record that as a session. And then you get one of the WebDrivers frameworks, and you can actually get Copado to run that every time that you get into your pipeline, or you get a user story. It can run those regression tests. So as well as running the unit test on Apex, you're running the regression test. And again, it's going to give you a much higher degree of confidence that what you're deploying is not going to break anything else, because there's nothing worse than finding a P1 issue in production that stops the whole business from working. I forgot to say, one of the other things, we talked about Git with Jenkins. I mean, there are many other tools there which are not Salesforce specific, but one of the other bugbears that I get, it's back in 2017, Salesforce was voted one of the worst platforms to develop on, okay? And what you've got this concept of a citizen developer, which is a person who would actually create objects, validation rules, process flows. So they're using all of the, what I classify as out-of-the-box features of Salesforce, which is great, because that's predominantly your first choice. If you can't do it using out-of-the-box features, then customization through Apex Lightning components should be considered. But it's then when you have that citizen developer and a hard code developer, how do you get those people working together? Because I guarantee you that a citizen developer will not know what Git is, they will not know what command line is, and they're going to really, really struggle. And again, I think that's where a tool like Copado really comes into its element, because these people can work together. Behind the scenes, Copado is doing all of the hard work. Again, on the with I think whether it was this year or maybe last year, you had the metadata rules that came in. So you get things like that CodeScan is now checking to make sure that we have descriptions on custom fields and custom objects, etc. So getting people to work together is possible with a Salesforce specific tool. Any thoughts on that, Will, Andrew?
I think you
Well, go ahead.
You did really well covering it. Yeah.
Okay. The other tool that I'm trying to stay away from, because I'm going to give Andrew this one as well, was Salesforce Dx. And again, it's interesting it came out 3-4 years ago, but it hasn't exploded onto the DevOps scene yet. It might do. I just thought, with your experience, Andrew, with where that product's come from, do you want to give some thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'd love to. So Salesforce Dx, I mean, I'd been working in this challenge area for a couple of years already, but when Salesforce Dx came out, and so I literally was following Wade Wegner around Dreamforce, begging to get into the pilot. And so Aperio, where I was before, we were the first partner getting into the pilot there. First of all, it's a marketing term, Salesforce Dx. It's just a broad name. So people get a lot of confusion about what exactly it is and so forth. It's not a plug and play solution. It's not like one thing where if you just sort of drop Salesforce Dx in, it just magically works. What it is it is an increased investment from Salesforce's side in helping improve the developer experience. And it came out partly after this scathing developer survey on the Stack Exchange voted it, most dreaded platform voted Salesforce most dreaded platform to develop on. But they knew that they needed to invest more in that. But the Salesforce Dx team is basically, it's just the Salesforce platform team and the team that builds out all the developer tooling. They're working on the fundamentals. They're doing things like improving the metadata API, getting better coverage, getting things like Lightning sandboxes, and enabling things like unlock packages. Salesforce's job is to build the fundamentals, build new ways of creating orgs, build ways of creating packages, building ways of interfacing on a scripting environment. Salesforce does not see their job as completing the whole picture. They see their job as building the basic, creating the basic foundations and the building blocks and proofs of concept. That's why you've got the Salesforce CLI, which is awesome, right? Where you can type commands, SFDX, force source deploy and force source push and so forth. These commands allow you not only to run actions on the command line, but they allow you to script them together, right? You can string them together. And so that's how Salesforce has managed to roll out a lot of nice proofs of concept of, if you're on GitLab, if you're on Jenkins, this is how you use these scripts. And they're all a great start. None of them actually give you a complete DevOps solution. None of them actually help you to see how you can tie everything together. None of them, even having the capability to build unlocked packages, doesn't actually enable you to have unlocked package, turn your org into unlocked packages, right? And that's why people have attempted to make progress in these areas, but often really stalled. There's very, very few companies who are successfully working just with scratch orgs and unlocked packages in their development lifecycle. We're still at a fairly early stage in the process. Now, I guess 3.5 years after Salesforce Dx was announced, almost 4 years. And their team has not moved as fast as many of us were hoping. A lot of us have been holding our breath for a couple of years. There's features that have been in beta now for 3 years. So that's why it's still important to have like these pre-built tools. Again, shout out to Copado, but these pre-built tools that help you to manage the entire process, really get that whole thing done without your having to invest in scripting. To hire a person who knows Salesforce, who knows DevOps principles, who knows how to write scripts, who knows how to set up, or CI orchestration and so forth. It's an unusual skill set. And if you have such a person, like a Martin O'Connell or something on your team, that might not be the highest priority project you want them to be working on, right? Like there's probably other things you could be using their skills for. So that's the power of a pre-built solution.
And exactly, yeah, you'll build dependencies on people. These people are, in the times of COVID-19, God forbid, but people get ill, people want to take holidays. Does that mean your DevOps process will just stop while these people are not available? So, that's, for me, having used Copado on quite a few projects now, that it ceases to be a bottleneck. You don't have really any dependencies. As soon as people are aware of how it works, it just becomes, oh, okay, fine. This is the process. This is how it works. That's part of the reason why I like the product and the DevOps. So one of the questions we got is, how are Polsource, Copado, and CodeScan helping companies to get into streamline? So there's a couple of things, and I mentioned it right at the last webinar. So Polsource, we offer a couple of reviews. We can get CodeScan to look at your org. So normally we'll just run a scan, recent refresh sandbox, and we can do like a review of that based on the output from CodeScan. But by the way, if you go to the Polsource website, we now have a plugin which uses the free scan from CodeScan. So thank you, Will, for giving us that. That will give you an idea of what your issues are. But the actual full review that we do, one of our TAs will do it, and maybe if you're unlucky, I'll do it. Then that's good. And the second and third reviews will be, we actually work through your org, looking at your best practices in terms of code and also the processes that you have in terms of what's been built, and then secondly, working with you to understand what your DevOps solution is. Where are the pain points, and how can it be made better? What we're not saying is that Copado is the answer to everything as DevOps, but there may well be areas that your current DevOps tool, maybe you have a non-Salesforce DevOps stack that you would like to also do Salesforce on as well. So that's something else that we can certainly help with. in terms of the DevOps tool, and I know we've talked about it, but and I think Andrew mentioned it as well, is that we have Salesforce has some specific gotchas around DevOps. Things like CPQ, which is the configure price quote, and fill service lightning. Both of those are managed applications sitting on top of the Salesforce platform. They're very popular. But when you start to use Salesforce, deploy those through development and QA and user acceptance testing, then you realize that part of the application is data. So CPQ and FS Field Service Lightning, they have objects which hold configuration data, which is not user data, it's configuration data. And things like Copado has advanced data deployer, which will actually take the data from your development as you create it, or maybe your QA box, and deploy it to other Salesforce. And again, you can use tools like Jenkins and data loader to do all this, but at the end of the day, you still need someone to actually script all of that information if you're going to go with a if you're going to go with a homegrown DevOps tool. Any, Andrew or Will, any thoughts on that one?
I think what Andrew mentioned just before about SFDX in the homegrown DevOps tools, it's definitely it's almost like a toy box. You know what I mean? You have everything, you've got all the blocks you need to build it, but there's definitely an amazing amount of effort that it takes to make a very smooth and productive homegrown pipeline with those tools, even though they are very, very powerful. And I really appreciate what Copado has done when it comes to that. It makes it so much easier.
And just a reminder to all the participants, please put your questions in the chat. We've got some coming in, but we just want to try to make sure that we look at them all, group them together, and get any other input you've got.
Yeah, you might need to share them out because I'm sharing screen, so I can't actually see them. Those
we did have one question come in asking about Copado, for example, supporting other platforms like ServiceNow or Zendesk. Not at the moment, but it's certainly something that we're looking at. Nice to see you on there, Renato.
There was, I did have a thought yesterday because I got involved in a discussion with someone about Heroku and the fact that you now have you can do callouts to Jenkins and you can do URL callouts. So if those platforms have APIs available, then I think you probably could look at deploying them via, even though Jenkins would be the actual thing that's deploying it, you could still do that call out via Copado. It was something I was going to have a look at. It was just an idea I had yesterday. Yeah.
I mean, we've gotten such positive feedback on Copado, the user interface, the way it's organized and so forth, that we're definitely looking at how can we help coordinate other projects. One of the trickiest problems you'll have on any technology from a DevOps point of view is how to coordinate multi-project deployments, like multi-project pipelines. It's challenging. Every different technology has their own, interface that you need to work with to accomplish it, but to be able to see how these different, if you wanted to release to MuleSoft, for example, do you have a development and staging instance of MuleSoft? How do you orchestrate the deployments to that? And can you coordinate that so that the development Salesforce environments are connecting to the development MuleSoft environments, and you can promote or progress changes to both systems in parallel? It's a powerful challenge, and definitely something that we're committed to helping people with in terms of figuring that out, these next steps.
Yeah. Got another one here. So if you automate all the code scans, do you still need technical architects and senior devs? With CodeScan, what it's doing, you've got probably in excess of 500 rules based on the URL components, web components, Apex, etc. Okay. And what you can do quite easily, and certainly with the ones that come out the box, is that it will scan it will pick up probably 80% of the issues that a technical architect senior dev would perform during a pull request or maybe a review. Now, I've done plenty of manual reviews. I spent, there was a large project I did that I spent 8 days code review. It wasn't a highlight of my life, but I did do it. By using CodeScan, I can now, even on a big org with over 100,000 lines of code, what CodeScan will help with, it'll zoom in. It starts to show me patterns. So if I'm thinking immediately, if I have a DML statement and there's no try catch around it, I'll immediately start to zoom in on that, figure out why. Then look at, why is there no try catch? How are they handling those errors? And the other common thing it tends to bring up as well, it's where you have things like asserts in a unit test. So if your unit test have any asserts in, basically it means you don't have any unit tests, you're not testing anything. And that's the thing that CodeScan shows very, very quickly. Literally, you could do it. It takes probably 10 minutes on 100,000 lines of code to actually bring that through.
So the idea is that it captures all the low value issues. And that's what CodeScan, the repetitive things that don't really require a manual review.
Yeah.
So we've got a few more questions coming in here. Chris Grimshaw, maybe give this to Martin. Tech debt can be a subjective opinion. How do you manage the differing views of TAs and get alignment on which rules are going to be tweaked or the priority of a rule adjusted or handle exceptions?
Yeah, so again, good question, and that's predominantly while we had, I think we had 7 TAs. So we had a couple from EMEA, we had some from Poland, we had some from the US on these late night conversations. Some of the discussions got quite heated, but at the end of the day, the idea was to get that we got an agreement between us. It wasn't always unanimous about. Yes, we have to have comments at a header, we have to have comments here, or we have to have, that level of complexity in a method. And then what we then did was we documented all of those changes in a Google Doc that anybody can come and look at in the future. And then we implemented those changes into CodeScan. Now, the only difficulty, again, would, as I mentioned before, is like some of the projects are at different stages of a life cycle. So we may have different rules for a project that's starting as opposed to one that's actually in flight. But we did get there. But as I said earlier, it is a continuously evolving rule set, and it's not. We don't review the whole rule set. It's normally. We have a rule that we need to go and consider, and we have a couple of meetings a month that we discuss those and get agreement on those.
And so if you haven't checked out demos of CodeScan, definitely do that, because it really is a nice tool to do exactly that. You can have different rule sets for different kinds of projects. You can track the metrics. You can. One of my favorite things was, for code coverage, making sure that any new code was held to higher standards than pre-existing code. So we had tech debt and lack of code coverage and so forth. So the existing thing was a disaster. We knew we couldn't stop the project and just work on that. But what we did is we started holding all new code, what they call the leak period, all new code to a much higher standard than the old code. And what that does allows you to ratchet things up. So you're not adding new tech debt. And if somebody it goes in, I was always the Boy Scout who went into other people's code to clean things up. But as soon as you touch it, you've got to write code coverage for it. So it really promotes a little bit of that Boy Scout mentality of cleaning up.
The other thing that it brings, you've got the IDE plugin. So at the point, so this code hasn't even been saved yet into Salesforce or version control. So the IDE plugin is actually bringing back issues straight away. on a project, you may have some technical architects, or you may have some senior devs that, you know, they've come from Java backgrounds, they've been developing for 20 years, and they know all of the enterprise patterns, you know, and can write code really, really efficiently. Then you have some newcomers that have gone through the initial training with, you know, Salesforce best practices. And what we're finding is that with CodeScan, it's giving those guys immediate feedback on their code, and it's actually making the curve of training much quicker than it used to be. Because what it does, it sets a level playing field that everybody is actually developing at the same level of code that we enforce across our project.
We did have a question come through. Rick was asking about managed packages. So he's using Encino in his org. Encino is a tool that's used for financial services companies. You know, big complex managed package, and they experience problems, right, with their sandboxes. If the sandboxes get out of sync, if they have different versions, presumably, of the managed package, or the configuration data is different, the metadata is different, then they really struggle with that. So I'll go ahead and take this one for Rick, but it is important. There's a lot more than just metadata that you need to coordinate when you're trying to get your environments in sync. There's the version of the managed packages that you have installed. There's the Salesforce metadata. And then, especially for these complex applications like Encino, there's a lot of configuration data. And the configuration data is not simple data. You've got this complex data model. You know, it's a complex relational database that Encino uses just for its configuration. As well, you might have manual steps and so forth. So the challenge really for Salesforce development is, how do you move all of these things at the same time? If you have a developer and they had to upgrade their managed package version of Encino, they've got configuration data, they got Salesforce, you know, permissions and so forth that they're using. How do you move all of that together? And that's the challenge. That's really how Copado is designed. So the focus we have is on a user story centric model. So the developer's working on one user story, and for that user story, they might have to upgrade the managed package. They have to add some configuration data. They have to add metadata, manual steps, whatever. You can attach all of those steps to the one user story. And then Copado moves that set of changes through as one bundle through the pipeline. So when it gets to your integration environment, your testing environment, and so forth, you can deploy the data and the Salesforce metadata together. You can have steps like installing package versions and so forth, although that might require, there might be something you want to run through a review first. So you can add a manual step or an approval process step to that same thing, or you can say, anyway, but you can orchestrate all of those different aspects together. And that's the Copado data deploy tool that's really optimized for complex relational data, as seen in CPQ, as seen in Encino, Basic Gov, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, B2B Commerce Cloud, and so forth. All of those things. It's an important challenge.
And I think the other thing that you mention as well is the fact that you, particularly on the financial side, that you might have some data that's personally identifiable. So what the advanced data deploy does, you also have the option of, so really, would you want some PII data available in a developer sandbox? Probably not, but you would want some data to test with in a developer box or a QA. So with Copado, you can take a set of data, filter it and anonymize it, and push that to other orgs within your environment. So hopefully that will make things a bit easier for testing as well.
Martin, we had another one for you. This is a provocative question. So they were asking, how transparent should an SI be? And I think this is somebody from another SI, I'm assuming from another SI. How transparent should they be with the clients, right? If you allow, if you're running CodeScan on the code that your SI is producing, it's going to, it's going to expose some of the shortcomings in your own developer's code to the customer, right? What's the balance? Let's pretend we're all SIs on this line and none of your customers are here. But what's the balance in terms of transparency?
Well, we have a few clients that we've given access to their projects within. I think at the moment we're running 34 projects on on CodeScan, and we have clients that we've given read-only access to that, so we're perfectly okay with giving them access, and they can see the trend lines. They can see that. I mean, sometimes we have to explain what that is. It may well be that there's a major error that's come up, but in all honesty, it's the fact that it may well be some existing code, etc. But what's important is that, I think you mentioned it before, is that we're not increasing that technical debt, particularly if we've inherited a code base. And also, it's one of our projects was running over 18 months, which had a huge amount of technical debt when we started. I think it was over 1,000 days. And it was really nice to see the actual trend line of technical debt reduced from 1,000 days to 200 days. And that, that's CodeScan has this concept of like blockers, criticals, and majors, because they're the most important issues to fix straight away. But then you also have like minor issues and info onlys that, while maybe some of the minor should be addressed, it wasn't mission critical that we do them. So we had a few releases to get those down. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and I feel like the issue of fast feedback, a lot of us, we've shouted out a couple of times to CodeScan and how it gives the real-time feedback as you're typing, gives you feedback on the code, right? There is no faster feedback than that. It's like spell check or grammar check for your code. My take on the same question that Will is asking, or that Martin was responding to, sorry. You can pretend as an SI that everything's perfect and so forth, and hand it over to the customer 6 months later, 2 years later, whatever. But the customer is going to see, and it's going to catch up with you sooner rather than later. It's going to catch up with you eventually. So I would say it's painful, right, to be getting these metrics and feedback on the code quality and so forth as you're working. None of us ideally like feedback. But it's so powerful to get that feedback fast and early, and when you've first done something, and then you can learn, you can address, you can change processes and so forth. And that's so much better long-term for the SI customer relationship, than getting that feedback only a year later. Oh, you invested $1 million, but there was all these problems, right?
Yeah, I think as in that way that the new code period and the existing code, as you were mentioning before, Andrew, and the split between those in CodeScan is very useful, especially in an SI context where you want to make sure you're acknowledging those large issues in the original code base, but you have set a standard for your development for that customer, and you're moving forward with that standard. They're able to see that standard, and you can track it across, like Martin mentioned, with the technical debt going down. I think that's a really important thing, especially as feedback to your customers when you are being transparent with them with that development.
Yeah, and CodeScan, we roughly get about 3 new rule sets a year. So depending on what they are, is that we'd run an analysis on an existing project to see what the issues are. Let's take an example, a really good one that was done this year about object and field descriptions. So many projects that a lot of that is not put in, and for me it's a crucial issue to have there, because it's not just developers who should be putting descriptions in. It would be the admins as part of that project. I mean, Salesforce is meant to be a self-documenting system. There's nothing worse for me than the SI that was there was gone. You now look at a code base. You look at the code. There's no comments in it. You've got no documentation. You go back to the objects and fields, and they've got no descriptions in. And you're asking the client, well, what does this do? And they go and say, I don't know. So with something like CodeScan, it makes that almost impossible to happen by enforcing those rules. So that's something that at Polsource, that's what we do, and that's what we've pushed those rules in.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that that Ben, our CTO, really pushed towards. He was big evangelist of code quality and believing that a lot of that time saved wasn't just bugs and security vulnerabilities going downstream and then having to come back with all those people involved. It's having a standard on your code quality. And when new developers are stepping into a class or a project and it's standardized and the way you look at code is standardized, they're not spending half their time figuring out what an object does or what a class does. They're stepping into a very familiar setting and they're able to get down to work straight away. Focus on the things like business logic, you know.
Exactly. I don't think I mentioned it, but can I get rid of the TAs and developers? So I'd rather have my TA. He's a really highly paid resource. So I really have him working on the high value items with the client, getting the architecture right, looking at the integrations, more so than, oh, look, you've got some classes here and going through it and thinking I've got comments missing. I know what I'd rather have him doing.
We're almost at time. We've got a bit of a softball here for you, Will. Abhishek was asking, is there a way to proactively find issues at runtime like SOCL issues? So if he has SOCL queries that might, time out or run slowly, can he proactively find those at runtime?
Not at runtime.
Or sorry, at before runtime. Oh,
before runtime, yes. So we've got a lot of checks in CodeScan that do pertain to those things that are going to cause governor limit issues, such as calling SOCL in loops or those SOCL calls without where or limit statements. So there are a lot of checks in there for those issues for sure. Yeah.
I think the one that would help there, and again, it's
feature request.
I think it's minor, but we've changed it. It's where you're using the not operator, where it's not equals to. That's not always ideal in a SOCL statement because it's not going to use an index. So I look at that one a lot.
That was a feature request, Martin.
Oh, yeah, right.
Hey, it's been fantastic to be with everybody here. Thank you, everybody, so much. It's just a pleasure to have a chance to spend time with you all. Your questions have been lively, engaging for us, but I think we'd all be delighted to follow up with questions and comments if you want to reach out to any of us individually. I suspect you can find our contact information scattered around the internet someplace. And just get in touch with CodeScan, Copado, or Polsource with any more questions about how you can help improve your development lifecycle.
Yeah, hope you found it useful.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.